Hello, this is Michèle at Jasami Bookworm Podcast. And because it's coming up to Halloween, I've got a lovely, scary start of a story. I'm delighted to say that Paul Wandrum, author of Demon's Fair, is going to be reading the prologue and chapter 1. And then, just for Halloween, we'll have a spooky follow-up. Anyway, here's to Paul.
Demon's Fair, a novel by Paul Wandrum. Prologue, the Cathedral Eagle. Beyond the ornate choir screen of the Glasgow Cathedral is the home of the Eagle Lectern. Standing proudly with its wooden wings flared and its eyes scaling, every year visitors and worshippers marvel at its elegant 17th century French design. But not cleaning attendant Peggy Bain, no way. For 8 years now she has had her morning housekeeping job at the cathedral, and that big old birdie has always given her an unsettling feeling. As if its sullen eyes stared back at her, tracking her every movement. Most mornings she would leave off putting her blue filler duster to it until the very end of her shift, swearing it would only angrily whisper some sort of gibberish. Her husband had thought she had been inhaling a few too many of cleaning supplies when she told him, and maybe he had a point. She'd been working double shifts for the last year to keep up with the bills. In fact, that's exactly what she thought until last Tuesday, when she noticed the ghastly bird of prey had been gradually shedding more and more wood chippings onto the cathedral floor each day. After avoiding the bird for a few days, Peggy had finally had enough. At the end of her next morning shift, she mustered up enough courage to not only dust the bird, but to examine its cold, judging eyes for more than a moment. She returned her filler duster into the pocket of her red tabard apron and glanced at her wristwatch. 2 minutes to 11. "All right, Eagle Eyes," she said, slightly timid. "Let me have a wee look at why you're beginning to chip, so I can report it to Reverend Mark." She inched closer to its face, studying the bird. "Hopefully your dammy's enough for him to lock you away in the storage cupboard and out of my sight for good." What Peggy didn't know was that the horrendous evil trapped inside the wooden bird had reawakened. After a long slumber, it was hungry for revenge. Peggy was brushing her fingers across a chipped piece near the back of the bird's head, when a brief snapping sound, like a box of matchsticks breaking, came from the bird's eye socket. Peggy stepped back and watched as fragments of wood fell onto the ground, then glanced quickly back at the bird's eyes, and the crackling stopped. Then, in one piece, the eagle's beak broke cleanly off and fell to the floor. Before Peggy had the chance to look down at where it landed, her whole body tensed and froze with fear. Protruding from the eagle's beak was a pale, almost translucent skin, and a single charcoal-coloured eye peeking through and staring at her. Peggy stepped back, her hands shaking. The bird stretched its wings and lifted itself from the lectern and away from the sphere-column perch. The eagle took flight, circling the room, and with an intense fury tucked its wings closer to its chest and smashed straight through the blue stained glass window of Moses and into the city of Glasgow. Part 1. The Return of Terry Doyle. As the train screeched to a stop, Terry Doyle glanced outside the smudge-stained window and realised he had finally arrived back in his home city of Glasgow for the first time in 10 years. Hovering by the train doors, he cautiously scanned the groups of people manoeuvring through the station, searching for the slightest hint of her presence. A feeling of paranoia and fear lingered in his mind as he planted both feet firmly on the train, unsure as if he had made the right decision of coming home. He took a step back and felt a herd of people behind him pressing against him. Before he knew it, the eager passengers had nudged him forward onto the station platform and the decision he had made. He inhaled a long, deep breath and reluctantly made his way towards the old station clock. He was there to meet Pastor Hugh McClelland, the spiritual leader of the church who used to attend regularly with his wife and kids back in the days when he still had a family. As Terry shuffled past a few eager passengers, he was pleased to notice Hugh was already waiting. His head of hair, which used to be thick jet black in style like King of Rock and Roll, was now greying at the sides. To Terry's surprise, Hugh seemed to still possess the same habit of tucking his cigarette behind his right ear. It was a subtle observation, and one that recalled a sense of normalcy akin to the one he had before his involuntary departure. Now don't tell me you're still smoking the cancer sticks while saying your prayers to the good Lord, are you, Hugh? Terry asked, smiling as he walked towards his old friend, and possibly the only man that could help him survive being back in the city for at least a day. Now that you mention it, I was actually praying to him, hoping you hadn't gotten any uglier than what you were a decade ago. Hugh's dark brown eyes studied him with a confident yet friendly look. Well, big man, you're unlucky, I suppose. Guess the Lord works in mysterious ways. Look at me. I haven't changed a bit, eh? Not a bit, Terry grinned. The two men hugged under the old clock, as many friends, lovers, and even enemies had done in times gone by. It had been so long since Terry had felt the comfort of a friend and the sound of a familiar voice. He gripped Hugh's tighter and fought the surge of tears cresting around his eyes. I want to tell him the full story right here and now. I want to break down and just fucking cry my demons out until he tells me it's alright and that I'm safe. Safe to finally come back to my family, where I belong. Right, big chap, less of the bloody waterworks before we get on the bus back to Miller's Park Church. Mary, God forgive me for swearing, but trust me, mate, you don't want to have a meltdown in front of all these nosy bastards, know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Aye, I do know what you mean, said Terry, wiping his coat sleeve across his eyes. Good to see you're still foul-mouthed. Tough as nails, God's region pastor. Hugh shrugged. I'm always forgiven. Well, eventually. His once happy face transformed into a deep foreboding stare, as though of his past crept to the forefront of his mind. Let's just suppose you feel better when we get back there. He wrapped his arm around Terry, his face easing back to normal. Now come on, we better hurry and catch this bus, mate. Hopefully we can be at the church for 10:15. Both men walked down the stairs at Union Street exit and out of the station onto the bustling streets of Glasgow. Terry's eyes narrowed, examining every passer-by with an intense caution. I know it may sound odd, Terry said, but it's better we stay clear of Hope Street, just in case she knows I'm back. I don't want to risk it. The desperation and fear in Terry's voice caused an unnerving paranoia in Hugh's mind. His old friend had been frightened to his core, despite his reservations about Terry's whereabouts. Even at the moment, he considered something bad could be waiting behind a corner. Nobody just goes to work one night and then disappears. Hugh firmly believed the Lord worked in mysterious ways, and today he simply couldn't wait to unravel the mystery of how this man just vanished 10 years ago to the day on December 6, 2009. Both men took their seats at the back of the bus, away from any curious eavesdropper. As the bus hissed forward, Hugh grabbed the back of the seat in front of him and turned towards Terry. Now, when we get there, you're absolutely sure you're ready to stand up in front of 30 people and tell them your story? Without hesitation, Terry turned towards his friend, filled with purpose. I have to, Hugh. For reasons, more reasons than one. I'll tell you everything from the beginning. I need to do it, mate. I need to try and repair my soul. Well, I still have time, that is. All right then, son. You'll probably notice some of the old faces have changed over the years, and then again, somehow, time doesn't seem to have aged you, Terry. But for goodness sake, just don't confess you've been, sunning it up and bloody floor of the keys all this time. Aye, let's just say I went somewhere that was 100 times more roasting than Florida, that's for sure, Terry said, turning towards the window. Both men fell silent for the rest of the journey to Miller's Park. As the bus turned down a narrow steel lined with parked cars, Pastor Hugh stole a quick glance at Terry without him noticing. Here was a man who had gone out to start his usual night shift driving his hackney cab and never returned. Hugh remembered the times when, as days turned into weeks, Terry's wife Anne, who would phone the house every day and every night asking if he heard any news. He had let her down easy for the first few weeks until about a month into the investigation when the police had discovered his black hackney cab in Glasgow's Queen Mary Avenue, parked outside an ill-ornate house, the former residence of University Professor John Dunlop and his lecturer wife Tricia. The couple had tragically lost their lives when the building caught fire back in 1976. Many suspected that the house had been cursed, but no legitimate connection had been made to Terry's disappearance. The inside of his vehicle had been cleaned and suggested nothing out of the ordinary, and eventually the trail went cold. It was as if Terry Doyle never existed. Just what in God's name happened to happened to you that night, Terry? Hugh thought as the bus passed by a graffiti signpost which slightly obscured the name Miller's Park. Is this what did you mean last night on the phone to me? Hugh recalled Terry's words with a shudder. Demons walk silently amongst us, Hugh, and most of the time we just don't know it. Once you hear my story tomorrow, you will all know.
Well, thank you, Paul, for that reading. Now, don't forget, on Halloween, we'll have the special scary chapter 2. And then directly following that, please remember to RSVP to the launch of the Magic Lantern at the Panopticon, 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 2nd of November. It's a busy start to the holidays. And as always, I wish you a sunny day.